That's a very good feel. Good evening, everyone.
How we
How are
doing,
you doing
everyone?
today?
Hello.
Happy Canada Day, Ɩnternational.
Thank you. It's kind of a quiet Canada Day though this year.
Give us a rousing rendition of "Oh Canada."
No, I'm not really in the mood to do that.
Oh, Canada. We're going to butcher it for you.
That's a
There you
very
go.
well I
There you
know.
We'll give it to
well-
the Americans to fuck shit up.
Well, with what's been happening in the news up here lately, it's kind of a low-key Canada Day this year for us, right?
Yeah.
So,
That's
there's
true.
there's almost 1,000 unmarked graves now that have been found in a couple of different locations of Indigenous people from way back in when we first invaded Canada, basically. So it's kind of a sad turn on our history. So, but
Mhm.
Doesn't stop Americans.
True.
We'll
Hi,
celebrate no
Christine.
matter what. Greetings to our one Twitcher.
Were you going to ask something, Justin?
Yeah, I was going to say that a lot of the children that were killed and buried were over many decades. There were in order to convert people, they were getting children while they were young, and they were convincing families to send them off to boarding school for an improved education. And in these boarding schools, that's where all this stuff happened.
yeah,
Where
and
it was like a convert or die situation for many.
they were
many
Catholic
children.
boarding schools, and
Yeah.
they were being forced to convert, and it's a really sad it's part of our history. So
Yeah.
but
So
I mean,
hearing about what happened with these what they call residential schools, and then I'm listening to a podcast that's talking about the what the Catholic Church did in, I believe it was Ireland, where it was
Mhm.
like if you were an unwed mother or just like you stole an apple once, you would be sent to these schools, and they're the same thing happened, where it's just like, you know, tons of neglect and abuse, and people were dying left and right, and they were just like throwing them in unmarked graves. And it just brings me back to this conversation I had with like my mom and uncle, where they were just like, but the Catholic Church, like Catholic Charities is like the largest charity in the world. And I was just like, yeah, I wish I didn't know these specific things at the time because it was like a year ago, but I was just like, yeah, there's some bad things they did.
very.
I mean, it's not much different than what
And
we
there's
did
so many
here in
more
the States
things,
too.
so many
yeah.
more things you could indicate that they have done.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so many more. I know. Besides that news, Bill Cosby's released from jail.
Oh God, yes.
Yeah.
That's
Aren't we
and not just
excited?
released from jail, but the convictions overturned.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
ridiculous.
To be
Because-
fair, the reason he is because of something that was like sketchily done by the prosecutor. And if it was someone else, like someone who was like innocent or had like, you know, and we heard this, you know, everyone would be up in arms if they didn't release the person for what happened. So it's like it really, really sucks that the prosecutor effed up so badly and led to this.
Yeah. So, I mean, just the quick details of that is that part of the civil suit against him, he basically admitted to the sexual assault allegation as part of the civil suit. But as part of the agreement to give his statement on the civil suit was that
he wouldn't be prosecuted.
It would not be used against him
Yeah.
in a criminal case. So they went ahead and used that testimony as evidence in the criminal case.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
And again, if anyone else,
correct me if I'm
anyone else,
wrong.
we would be up in arms about it. But we're all
Yeah.
pissed, you know, because we're all bummed and pissed because it's Cosby, who we all are like about.
Yeah, everybody's blah on him right now because of what he did. But correct me if I'm wrong, though. The the prosecutor that made the deal with Cosby back in 2006 or whenever it was, that's the same lawyer that's defended Trump in the second impeachment trial, isn't it?
I have no idea.
I heard that the other day, and I'm not 100% sure it's true, but because it was just on Facebook, but I heard that the other day.
I heard that actually the prosecutor who made the deal is not the same one who went forward with like the criminal trial.
That's true.
So they switched. So it's like this other person kind of messed up. It wasn't the original guy, but it was like something. This was just a passing comment. I don't know how true it is, but they're like, oh yeah, there's this like young hotshot who wanted to make a name for himself, so he prosecuted Cosby, even though it, you know, he did it in against this deal that was made.
Well, the little bit I read on it said that that deal should have never been made with Cosby in the first place.
Of course.
Right. So, because the criminal charges would have to be pressed afterwards. It should have never been made.
Yeah.
Well, usually in cases, it's if there's a criminal and a civil that are like about the same, events. Usually the civil case wants to wait for the criminal case because the criminal cases have much higher burdens. So if they find it a criminal case, yes, you're guilty. Civil case is you just show up with the criminal conviction. You're just like, these people found it on beyond reasonable doubt that this guy's guilty. At a civil case, you have to prove by like a 51% chance that they did it. Like that's kind of the percentage.
I think the case here was that the people that were going after him in the civil case was outside of the time frame allowed for the criminal. Okay. So the statute was up. Yeah, so the statute was up. Well, there's so many people involved in this. It's kind of crazy of how many people came forward.
Yeah, it's hard to keep track of who's allowed to do what because of just how many people over a long time frame brought out evidence.
And kind of on the same vein of this topic is the Boy Scouts just reached an $850 million settlement on their sex abuse claims.
Nice.
I hadn't heard that one.
Church is very proud of you.
Very proud.
Well, they... I think it was a federal court just lifted the restriction where they couldn't attack them on the civil cases that were, so old, like some age limit. But they just lifted that restriction, and now they were hit with a flood of sex abuse suits, and they filed bankruptcy over it, and now they're settling for $850 million.
Yeah, that.
And this is like one of the gold standard organizations that we entrust with our children to turn them into functioning adults.
But we can't let gays in because they'll cause problems.
That's right.
That's the real problem is the gays coming in.
I mean, they would have more if they had gays. Just saying. Probably not. Well, fun week, interesting week. Tail end. Oh, it's fucking. I didn't even realize it's even freaking July. Ooh, who works Monday? I don't.
I don't work Monday.
I took a week.
I had today off.
So.
Right. Well, of course you had today off.
I had a Zoom call for work on Monday, and they did this like scavenger hunt in your house of like go find an item that in your house that makes you think of summer. So because of that, I have a grill spatula and a beach ball next to my desk.
There you go.
Very random.
I feel like you took both of those items from your children.
Yeah, maybe.
Mm.
I don't know about that.
Jesus. Well, that's interesting. Thank you for sharing. Oh wow, that's right. The bane. What harmonic command? The bane of our times. People mind their own business without permission. Oh, I'm not sure what that's referencing, but that's okay. Moving on. It's okay. Hi, harmonic command. Yeah. Tonight's topic, basically, just I don't know, something I've been kind of toiling in my head, and as far as talking with common people, common folk like y'all. Let's first thing put out a poll. What? We're not. We don't sell drugs here.
No.
ʻOllieman.
We just advertise them.
Oh, I'm glad we're not monetized. Anyways.
One day, we're working on it. How many subs we at? We had 119. So
I don't even know what the level is when you get monetized.
It's 1,000 subscribers with 4,000 hours of watch time.
Oh, wow.
We'll get there some year.
Eventually.
They're up on our stats. I like it. All right. So poll. Lovely question. Thank you everyone who participated in answering the poll. I appreciate it. But let's go ahead and share what the little evidence we had.
The little evidence.
The little evidence.
Our little sample size.
Yes, our sample size of 19 voters. Hey, actually, you know what? That's a boost from when the last time I did a poll. And, you know, hey, I'm excited. So the question was...
I have Twitter now.
Hey, he's going to go wild.
Oh my God, he has Twitter. No, I'm glad you're welcome to the Twitter family. So this week's question, what would you identify yourself as? And pretty much, I mean, basically majority of those that answered them as deconverters, meaning they have deconverted themselves from a religion. Sorry for that. That was way crazy.
I got to admit, I was kind of confused as to what I should answer to this question, because I believe everybody is a cradle atheist because you're not born with religious knowledge and belief. You're indoctrinated into a religion and then have to deconvert, right? To become an atheist, right? So everybody's a cradle atheist.
That is a separate conversation worth having of whether or not atheists have justification for their position. Or require justifications for their position.
Hi, Kelly.
Kelly.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Let's
Someone asked me what I had on my shirt, so
it's
good to see you.
Let's do that. Let's put me over here. There we go. Okay, I like it. Welcome, Kelly. How are you doing this evening?
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Is that a beer? You got a beer in your hand?
No, I'm drinking an Orange Dream soda from a small soda company in Wisconsin. It's made with real honey, and it's amazingly delicious.
That's cool.
Real honey.
I would like to try that.
I'll send you one.
Get it past the border control.
Right. To my knowledge, Kelly, you're a deconverter, meaning you deconverted from a faith and or religion in the past, correct?
That is correct.
I know I myself am a deconverter from Christianity. Justin, you're actually a cradle atheist.
Cradleist.
The cradleist of them all.
Cratheist.
Okay.
I'm going to stop. Just move on.
Okay, thank you. Ɩnternational, I suspect that you identify yourself as a cradle atheist just based upon the previous statement.
Actually, I identified myself as a deconverter.
Do tell. What's the what faith?
Catholic, Christian. I don't know. I went through communion when I was a kid and went to Sunday school and stuff like that. And my parents made me do this, but I don't know if I ever really believed in any of it. I mean, back when I was a kid, you just kind of believe everything you're told. And then when I got old enough to think about it myself, it was like, well, wait a second, this doesn't make much sense to me. And that's basically where I went from there. So
I think there's an important distinction to make there. I mean, if you don't even know, I'm the craziest. If you don't even know what you're deconverting from, there's a difference between a person that like actively believed it and actively believed they had good reasons and justifications for it and evidences for it, rather than you just kind of went along with the party for a while and then.
Yeah, well, I identify as a deconverter from Santa belief too, right? So
right.
Yeah, that was essentially me. Like when I responded to the poll, I was like, I'm technically a deconverter. Like I was raised, with going to church and listening to sermons and everything, but it was like the low keyest Catholic family ever. Like we went to church every Sunday, but like I was brought up with the idea that like, oh, if you go to purgatory, and I was just like, I'm not a terrible person. I'll just go to purgatory and it won't even matter. Like, whatever. But like, I know at least like I was reading old journals I had, and there was a point where I was just like, oh, I'll pray to God that so-and-so happened, like this happens, or like, God bless the people who died on 9/11. I said stuff like that, but like, it wasn't like I prayed. I don't really, I never thought about it because it really did not matter to me.
But for a moment, you held on to a God belief. Yes,
yeah, but like it was like such a tiny portion of my life. Like I'm sure if I like ran into like, if anyone actually questioned me on it, I probably would eventually just be like, I don't know. I never really tried it. So it's like, yeah, you know, it was such a small deal for me that like if like so I might have been like upset that I wouldn't have go to heaven. That's because my idea of heaven was like, oh, it's paradise and everything's great and you actually like going there, not just you bow to God for all of eternity.
Okay, fair. And to some extent for you, ʻOllieman?
My parents went to church 3-4 times a year, like Christmas for midnight mass.
Major holidays.
Yeah, major holiday stuff. That was about it. That was while I was living up in Toronto when I was really young. And then when they moved home themselves back here to PEI and family was everywhere, that's when they started sending me to like Sunday school and getting me ready to communion and stuff like that. And so
yeah, but for you personally, never held to any type of God belief, never prayed, things like that.
I prayed because I was told you should pray. You know, I didn't pray because I wanted to pray. I was like, you should pray. You know, you should do these things. And that's about it. And it was never even pushed on me that much because, like I said, my parents don't have strong belief, right? And the church really isn't their thing. My mom, she's the one that really kind of believes in God, but I don't think she agrees with the way Christianity and Catholics and stuff do it.
Yeah,
so.
And that's my point. Just distinguishing, because there's a bit of a bit nuance, a bit of like gray areas in between all of that. Like you state for yourself that you say you deconverted, but you didn't necessarily, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, you didn't necessarily have that faith or belief, or you only prayed because you were told. You didn't pray because maybe you got in trouble and you just felt like, oh, I need to get on my knees and pray to God. Like I've had moments like that when I was young.
Well, all through my youth and through like my teenage years and my 20s and even into my 30s, I always thought, yeah, there's a God out there, but I just didn't do any actual active worship or anything like that. I didn't know any better because I never thought about it critically. Right?
That's fair.
It was just in the background for me because my parents weren't strict about it. You didn't have to go to Sunday church if you didn't want to. They never forced me to go take part in any of it except when I was really young.
That's an interesting thing to think about when you have the notion that how do you reason people out of beliefs they didn't reason themselves into, right? So, you know, when the idea of like, what's the point of pointing out fallacies and giving arguments and good reasons and this and that. And the fact is that just many people just never thought about it. They never had their beliefs challenged. They were indoctrinated and kind of had this group built around them that just never really had to think twice about it because that's just the way everybody thought and nobody pushed against that. So,
well, you're also always told it's not polite to talk about religious beliefs in mixed company. So you don't get any outside influence other than what your parents said to you when you were a kid.
Yeah, so don't talk about religion and politics at the dinner table because we don't want our beliefs questioned by, you know, other people that are part of our family that are potentially influential. We don't want to have to deal and contend with that.
But that's very relative. First and foremost, hi, Multi. Good evening.
Hi, Multi.
Hey, Multi.
You have a nice shirt on.
Multi,
I appreciate that.
Cradle or Deconverter? Yes, I still have my special up.
Cradle.
Yeah.
Easy.
Now, Cradle would because we kind of talked about this with everybody else. Would you say that you've never ever believed ever, or did you believe or pretend to believe or go along with the belief just until the point where you started thinking about it and said, well, this never really made sense to me?
Sure. Kind of embarrassing. But
full screen.
My father was a deist.
Bill Nye is watching you, so you better come
and my father was a deist, and my mother, I think it was the atheist. When I was growing up, she was the one that had the problem with the problem of suffering. Actually, is when I asked her, why don't we go to church? Why don't we? Why do you? It was seen as a chore that you had to do every once in a while. It was, oh yeah, you know, your aunt and uncle go to church, so on Sunday we're on the holiday when we're going to go visit them, we're going to have to go to church. Sorry, but you'll have to be good there, right? That was how I was brought up. After the first major death in my family, I was in my earlier 20s, mid 20s. I read a little Deepak Chopra.
Oh boy.
Oh,
That's the embarrassing part.
Yeah, that's the embarrassing
major. No, wait. I'm sorry.
And I had
Major
a little
full
bit
screen.
had some feelings of wow, yeah, that really makes sense for some reason. But then again, it got me aligned, so my intention and my stated goals and my epistemology were kind of working together to push me in the direction of away from retail grocery and going to school to try to better myself. So it did give me a false sense of superiority is not the right word. Competence, or overconfidence.
I wouldn't even say either of those are the right word, because it made you feel like you could be something bigger and more important, more influential than what you currently were. Yeah. So I guess maybe confidence is the right, but it made you believe in yourself. So that because I've listened to a lot of Deepak Chopra, and I know the kind of content that he puts out, and I know that the whole oneness with the universe, we're bigger than we, atheists or whatever would make us think that we are, type stuff. So that it makes sense that, because and even people that are not, even people that are not into like the quantum woo nonsense will try to kind of tie things together in a way to make you feel like you are somewhat important, at least.
Yeah, that's a big part of that whole scene is it's designed to make it seem like it makes sense if you don't think about it too much. But a big part of it is making it seem like you are special. You can do all these things.
Yeah, that I think I was able to clear myself of that in less than 5 years.
Okay.
You did a lot better than I did.
Yeah.
Just got slapped down a few times.
But I feel like if you don't have a reasonable understanding of science, and you're not actually studying or not intimately aware with at least one branch so you can follow the scientific method, and you don't have a good education, it's easy to fall into those traps of, oh, he's using big words, this sounds right, it sounds like it makes sense, and if you already believe something like there is a creator of the universe that can poof anything into existence, the rest of the stuff isn't nothing else is far-fetched at that point. Anything is possible. So it depends on where you're coming from. That there's a reason that a lot of people buy into this stuff.
And there's that inherent idea of wanting to be like very special and wanting more out of it than just you're a monkey person. You're a monkey who's slightly smarter than the other monkeys, and
sometimes.
And the idea of like, oh, we're human. Like, think of all the things that we have created. Like, who would have thought that 1,000 years ago? Who would have thought that we would have stuff like this and all the crazy like shows we have and everything like that? Clearly, there has to be something there that's making us so special, or clearly we must have such great influence in the universe to.
Fair, yeah.
And so when someone's like, oh, if you think and become one with the quantum realm or something, I don't know, they make something up that makes it sound like you're very special and wooey, and we are one with the universe more than the monkeys, the cats and the monkeys are, when really we're just really smart apes. And
sometimes. And Justin, I have to push back on that, because on what you said, just and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm stating you basically said if they don't believe in the big words and the science and the things like that, it's easy for them to fall into the belief of the woo, essentially.
Well, right, because what they're selling is a false sense of expertise. So they're appealing to authority, saying, I studied this, I wrote this book, I spent all this time thinking about it, and this is the way the universe works. And so if you don't have, if you don't rely on yourself to kind of refute that, and you haven't been exposed to the broader scientific community or science communication or other people that are kind of saying, hey, no, this is nonsense. If you haven't had a lot of exposure, it's easy to kind of accept what they're saying.
But what if you have? Isn't there a bit of an exception? I can certainly attest that it wasn't necessarily me that disbelieved or chucked out my biology or physics or whatever type of science textbook. I tried to meld both things. I trusted what my textbooks told me. I trusted science. I loved watching, the Science Channel and learning about the universe and different pulsars and other galaxies. And that shit is real for me. That shit was fun to watch. And I still, on occasion, watch them. So, but then when I held onto a faith, I just attribute all of that to God. Well, I would obviously the simple, statement would be like, well, God made all that. But I would say, God made all the big brain calculations and gave it all to these people. So it's a blessing and, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely exceptions, and there's definitely ways to justify, like I said, once you believe that there is a thing out there that can create everything or anything out of nothing, that can basically invent the laws of physics, can do what we would call magic, nothing is off the table at that point. You can attribute anything to that. You can say you can be the leader of the Human Genome Project and still be a creationist because you believe there's a thing out there doing magic throughout the universe.
Sure. And it's not like there aren't scientists or physicists that aren't believers.
I know the leader of the Human Genome Project is actually a creationist.
There you go. That's why I said it.
but it's because it's unfalsifiable and it can explain everything. It's that magical panacea that can explain anything and everything. And if you don't apply, some sort of standards to what you attribute to this thing, you can accept that it can apply and do anything.
Okay.
One of my best geologist friends is a Christian, so there are a lot. I know at least one very Christian scientist, so they're out there definitely.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
But there's the ones that are honest about it, that are Christians and scientists, and then there's the ones that do Christian science, which is a whole different thing that we're talking about.
I mean, it's an idea of like how, again, like if I never ran into atheist content, a couple years ago, how different would I be? Probably not that different. Like I probably still have pretty much most of the same values that I have now. Like that just might be it for some people, is that there's never been a real challenge to their fundamental, belief system. Like if you're someone who's brought up that like, oh, gays are abominations and they're terrible things and they're against God and blah, blah, blah. And then you like interact with a bunch of gay people and they're fine. And then you're like, well, then that kind of like really, might kick into gear, like thinking about it. But if it really did, like religion for me was like, so like not like hardly a thing. It was like 0.1% of my being or something. Like I was raised Jewish originally until I was like 7 or 10 or something. And I played video games and drew Yu-Gi-Oh characters in class. And then the way that I went through like Catholicism was this like slapdash once a week, like after school, like bullshit, like literally bullshit, like, Christian education. And it was just me and a bunch of other kids who like, weren't baptized originally, just hanging out in like the basement of the church, just dicking around for like an hour, like while this one woman tried to teach us stuff from the Bible. And I remember nothing from that at all. We didn't learn a single thing. We might have done some like charity stuff, and that's like all I remember. But that, and I was baptized communioned and confirmed by the time I was like 12. So it was like, you know, it was so nothing to me that, you know, I never thought about it. And then when I finally did think about it, I was just like, oh, that doesn't really make any sense. And then it just drops like nothing. So
Right.
some people, it's just they never have a reason to challenge it. So, and when they hear stuff, they're just like, oh, I'll just fit it into the God belief. It doesn't matter so much. Because even though we hear about all these people who are like, nope, Earth is 6,000 years old, you know, and if it's not, then, you know, God is fake. Like, other people are like, Earth's probably 1 billion years old. People just got it wrong. Like, the Bible's not like, you know, it just doesn't matter too much to them. So they don't really think about it.
Yeah, an interesting point, because with J. Mike's statement, they bought into the spiritual nonsense. That aspect of being religious versus spiritual never made sense to me. I think in part because through my upbringing, I won't necessarily attest it to all Black culture within the Black church and everything like that, but through my personal upbringing within the Baptist church, it's kind of like the spiritual and the religion and the God and the Jesus all in one thing. It's not separate. So to say that, oh, well, I'm not religious, but I'm very spiritual. I'm like, but that's still God to me, in my mind, based on how I was raised and based on how I knew or was given that type of knowledge. And
I would say that in most cases, especially with Christian, you know, the monotheistic gods like Christianity, they're inseparable, because everything that you know about God comes from the religious doctrine. What they want, what the commandments are, what they did, what their attributes are, just everything that you know about God comes from religious doctrine. So you may disagree with the official churches, or you may not go to church, or you may say, well, I'm not going to follow these commandments or laws, or the, you know,
I'm going to go to a Baptist church, not a Pentecostal.
Or I'm not going to, you know, I don't believe in the verses of the Bible because they conflict with science, or, you know, in history and whatever it may be. But I'm going to believe all the stuff saying that all the argument and, you know, reasoning in the books that say, you know, this is what God did, or this, you know, God exists, or, you know, the reasoning and justifications for it. And then I'm going to build this one-on-one, you know, relationship with God, and then call that spirituality.
I have a question for all of you. Do you feel that deconverters are more sympathetic or more, I don't know, well, yeah, sympathetic or empathetic, I should say, towards believers versus Cradle atheists are, or vice versa?
I would say a bit just like empathy-wise, maybe they're like, oh, I understand why. Maybe just like generally, but I'm sure there's always going to be an overlap. There's going to be some who are like, oh, I believed and now I don't. Why are all these idiots not? You know, there are people here who are like, oh, when I was 13, I realized all of it was nonsense. Why are there people who are like 25, 30 who still believe in it?
If you're over 25 and you believe in fairy tales,
it's
you're
just
an
like,
idiot.
okay. But and then there are Cradle atheists who are like, you know, oh, I never understand this, but maybe they understand why people believe and why they never did. Because, you know, if you're a homeschool Christian child with a preacher father or something versus just, you know, my family who was like, we go to church, but like we only hear the nice verses, we don't pray or do anything like that, I might be like, well, it makes sense that I maybe never believed in that environment because I didn't have like a preacher father, you know, hitting me over the face with Bible verses all the time. So it's kind of, there's different aspects. It's just different aspects of what you could, whether you emphasize with current believers or not.
Yeah. And I guess I asked that because, and actually, I agree with you, Justin. It depends. It really does depend.
Right. Well,
because you can have.
I've never, you know, I've never went to a church or had a religion or belief or anything, because that was never imposed on me. But I have very, very strong political influences from when I was a kid that it is really hard to overcome that or believe to the contrary, even when the evidence is available. It takes a lot of reading and a lot of of hearing other people talk about it and explain it in various different ways to finally accept a position that's different from one that I grew up firmly believing. So I definitely understand the indoctrination part of that to some extent.
Okay. Do you feel that, how do I want to pose this question? Do you feel that based on some grasp or level of understanding, that you found yourself, I guess, a bit more empathetic versus people that just didn't necessarily care or didn't want to try and bridge any type of understanding, but just would forcefully, throw arguments, throw fallacies, or just force them out of their own religion altogether?
More recently, I've been trying to be better at learning and listening and understanding that there's lots of different reasons that people believe what they believe, and most of which they have no control over. When I was younger, my mindset was a lot different. It was a lot more of, if I could figure this out, everybody else can. Or, if I can do these things, everybody else should do these things. It was much more libertarian of how, if I can do it, everybody can do it type mindset. But I was also, out of high school going into the military, you almost had to think that way. You had to believe that everybody around you was as competent as you are, or more so, or else you couldn't live from one day to the next if they weren't.
I remember when we had this conversation, because then once you transitioned out of that and you had this whole mindset and level of expectation, you were almost legitimately culture shocked.
Yes. I mean, in that context, you would be paralyzed by fear of other people being incompetent to the point of being dangerous. So you had to believe that everybody was capable of the same types of things that you were. But like you said, afterwards, it just takes a while to
adjust,
have a better understanding and adjust and be more empathetic and sympathetic and just be better at listening and understanding.
Yeah.
So it takes years to develop that, or even to want to develop that.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah. And I think there has been a few mentions in the chat that I agree with, in that a deconverter, has to go through those grieving processes, and one of that is anger. So to answer your question, for part of the time, maybe a Cradle atheist might be able to be more sympathetic. I don't know about empathetic, but that's just because I think there is there's a tendency to go through an angry phase.
Sorry.
Maybe not for everybody.
No, true.
No, I can see that for those that have been heavily indoctrinated, for sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I never went through an angry phase for the most, really. So, but I was not heavily indoctrinated either. So
you went through an angry phase about your parking lot.
Yes, I did go through an angry phase about my parking lot.
I don't. So I must be. I'm lost on that one. That's too inside baseball for me.
I'll explain it to you later.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing on Facebook.
Just have a look at Kelly's Twitter feed. You'll figure it out.
I didn't think Kelly could be that angry.
I was very irate. Yeah.
Okay.
I was just explaining why I got so irate about the whole thing. It was just a long list. If it had just been 1, 2, or maybe 3 of the things on the list, I wouldn't have got so irate. But I think what bothered me the most was the guy was being intentionally obtuse.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was what
the way
was
you
really
described it.
making me
That
mad.
seemed like it was exactly what he was doing.
All right.
Okay, Kelly, what's your Twitter so I can follow you?
It's not on Twitter. It's actually on Facebook. I don't have a Twitter, so.
Oh, was it Facebook I was seeing it on? Okay.
It was Facebook. So
religious trauma can prevent people from moving past their anger to a more empathetic state. It's complicated to get there. So people can hang onto this anger for years. Sometimes from being forced to relive this trauma, from being surrounded by the same people, being forced to go to church, being excommunicated by their family or their community, and just constantly having to deal with that situation. So there's a lot that can just make that drag on for a long time.
Yeah. And for like how Kelly had mentioned, I mean, I've certainly been angry about things, but I've never hit an angry phase. I don't even know if I necessarily will. It's always just been, I guess, I would honestly say, to my understanding, just listening to other people and knowing of other people's deconversion stories and how they've gotten from that place to here, I feel like it's a judgment based on more so on their personality. And that's just my own personal observation. But for me, it's just I don't feel that, nor have I ever moved into an angry phase when I deconverted. It was more just a heavy breakdown of a lot. And for me, if most of you all know, I was very much heavily indoctrinated. It was just, it's breathed throughout my whole family on a daily basis, even now. And so living through that now, and just having to cycle in your own mind and break down all this stuff, and then now you leave all that faith aside, and then you're just left kind of empty and lost and sad and hopeless and all this other stuff, and then everything else about life compiles on top of it. I feel that for myself, when I just dialing back to the whole if a deconverter is more empathetic versus a cradle atheist or vice versa. Again, I say that varies. I know for myself, I feel that I hold more empathy towards a person that holds on to a faith, especially because, obviously I just take it more personal with my family, my mother and my sister, essentially, because, with the loss of my father pretty much a decade ago, we all branched out and grew from that grief differently. They obviously held on to their faith, and I gradually lost mine and then some. So it's kind of interesting how I can visualize and see their growth, I guess you could say, up until now, today, and how they held on to their faith and how much good it has done for them versus, I lost mine. I would, I guess, consider myself in a good place in my life. More or less, wanting certain things, sure, but I'm, I make money. I have a house and blah blah blah. But it's more than just the materialistic. It's for me. It's actually just losing a sense of support, losing a sense of self, actually, because especially with being a Black person, with having the Christian belief so entrenched into the Black culture, it's kind of like, well, now you're not only just dropping your religion, you're dropping the very meaning of what it means to be Black. Like, you're not a Black person. That's deep.
I remember Mandisa Thomas did a talk, I think, for the RFR people, and that was essentially what she was talking about, was like, if you're not religious, you're like, you're on the fringes of Black culture or something along those lines, because it's how entrenched it is.
You're within a subculture of within a subculture of within a subculture.
Yep.
I had a question. So in part of that, you said that early on you were able to kind of see how other people deconverted. Do you think that having like what we have on the ACD is like almost like a repository of deconversion stories that I made a long time ago, and other people have done it too, and there's been places where you can kind of read these testimonies or whatever you want to call them. But do you think having something like that, especially to people that are newly deconverted, is helpful? To especially when there's so many of them, to say that it's not just one or two or three or five people. There's hundreds of them on there of, sometimes similar stories, sometimes crazy off the wall, some really boring, some
super sad, some very basic. Whatever.
Yeah, and you can kind of gauge and say, well, look, they're not all better and they're not all worse than what I went through, but it's just so varied. And
It's
it kind
very
of puts it in
yeah.
perspective.
And
It
I think
does.
I think those stories help people to join the community too, just because you read them and you see similar stories to your own, and it just helps you feel like, okay, these are my people, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So
Right. I'm
Yeah.
not alone.
And you hear how, you know, they might find a story like, oh, now, you know, I believed I would go to heaven and see my, you know, my father or my mother who passed away, but now that I've deconverted, like, how do I deal with that? But then they find a story about someone who's dealt with it, and they kind of see what they did, and they're like, oh, okay, so like,
Yeah.
it's going to be tough, but this person did it. I can see how they went through it. You know, maybe my journey will be similar, and eventually I can maybe get to their mindset.
Yeah. And actually, Nate raises a good point here that I was leading into, because one thing, and he had mentioned it early on in the chat, was a deconverter often has a lot of baggage left over once, you know, losing that faith. And it'd be interesting, because, and it's actually an interesting concept, because I kind of thought about this a little bit more earlier today. You would think that once you relieve yourself of a God belief and a faith, that you have more weight lifted off of you. But I recall having just more weight put on me, if anything, because now I'm dealing with, now that I know that, oh, I can no longer attribute me being not celibate, me not be, or me being not wait, me waiting to have sex before marriage, or whatever the case may be for anyone. I'm no longer attributing that to, you know, what scripture tells me to. So now it's kind of like you're in this lost void, and you have all of these questions weighing on you, and then you try to also rationalize with yourself, well, am I still a good person? What are my morals? Like, I feel that I'm still the same person. Maybe I can feel free and think a little bit more differently, but now I have to kind of rationalize what I attribute to be sin versus it's not sin because that doesn't exist, or whatever the case may be. But also with the added baggage is that so much of that can weigh on you, where you not only lost yourself, but you just, you know, recluse, and you try to do so much more good, and you try to prove yourself so much more harder than you did before, because now it's kind of like, well, I need to still demonstrate that I'm a good person. I didn't just lose my faith because I was angry. I didn't just lose my faith because, you know, my parent died, or my relative died, or some tragedy happened, or I was paralyzed, and how dare God allow this for me to happen, or whatever the case. That's a lot to grasp almost all at once. And then it takes several months, years really, to sift through all of that. And when you are doing that on your own, I think that's even harder. So. Did I get too deep? I'm sorry. Everyone was dead
only
quiet.
surface level skepticism allowed here.
Right, my bad. But I'm sorry, someone's gonna say something. Just jog my memory. See, I have found that a community of people, no matter where they are in their deconversion process, helps a lot. People who are doubting can feel very alone, especially if everyone believes. True.
Yeah, that's something. Go ahead, Malty.
Well, I think I was going to go the same place you were in that. That is one of the very big draw of religion is community, and it's a stick as well as a carrot. Or the removal of that community used to be that was a death sentence.
Right.
And so
fortunately for the online thing is that you can find a community of any stripe that you're looking for. So like you were saying, when you left your religion or whatever it was, you left your whole community, you left every person you've ever known, your family, your friends, your probably your schools, whatever it may be. But that stranglehold is no longer, that does not have to be 100% anymore. Online communities are not a one-for-one replacement, for sure. But if you can find one, that's why Discord is so good, is that you can actually talk to people or video chat with them, and as well as chat with people. Or if you can find something local, like a community center or something that doesn't necessarily revolve around that, so you don't feel like you're losing everything. And just that sense of loss or potential loss can keep you believing these things and voting in line with them and acting in line with things that are kind of against your beliefs, but you're going along with them anyway, because that's just the only thing that you know, or the only thing that you think is acceptable. So just having community and just something available is helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It really hurts when I see, because I'm not a person to do debates or anything like that. I mean, they're entertaining more or less. And, you may feed off of good ideas and points and different perspectives. I mean, there's not a whole inherent wrong to it, but I mold myself more in just conversation and just trying to find some middle ground with the person that you're talking to, whether they agree with you or disagree with you. And then ultimately, if they continue to disagree with you in the end, at least you can build a friendship or build a continuing conversation next week or anything, really. Just leaving some type of footprint in that person to where they feel that, okay, well, they don't believe in God or believe in my faith, but they're cool people. And I think that's good enough. And one other point, and I'll end it here for my little deep rant. I was talking to a close friend earlier today, similar to kind of this discussion. And they said that, and it's something that I kind of reflected on a lot as far as feeling lost. And in that lost journey, you're kind of broken and you're just sunken. And what he said to me was, no matter how broken you are, you still hold value. Even if it's, you're down to your very last pieces, like a vase on a floor that's been tipped over by like a customer or something, there's still value attributed to that. And all of those pieces hold that value. And you should remember that and have that be empowering. And that speaks volumes, because a lot of what that lost journey feels like is that you're broken because you have nothing to attach to anymore. Done with my TED Talk.
For coming.
Thank you.
You went over the 18 minutes, but that's okay.
Well, I can what? Is that the standard? Is that the standard for a TED Talk?
I think you're supposed to only have 18 minutes. It's
really?
Like if you watch them, they have like different camera angles, and you see like right in front of them, they have like a countdown clock. And I think it's like 18 minutes is supposed to be the max, and of course everybody goes over. A lot of people go over.
Because I was gonna say, I feel like I've seen longer ones, but
well, sometimes people go up there for like 5 minutes, and you're like, okay, well they didn't use all the 18 minutes, so it's like
the 19 and 20 minute mark is when they unveil the secrets to the universe. So you gotta give them some leeway.
Stick around for that. Dang.
That's what that would be.
Gosh. Final points. I love you guys. You guys are cool. Wow. And quite honestly, and you know what, Kelly, I'm so sorry. I'm such a fucking crier. Like, Justin, shut up. What was it yesterday? No, the Tuesday. I finally did meet the cast and crew of ACA, and I enjoyed it, and I hope to do it again sometime when I happen to take a half day off again.
I was really happy to have you.
Yes, no, thank you. It was fun. It was. I was met like freaking hard ass questions, and I'm like, why is everyone trying to make me cry?
Like, why did you disown your dog? When are you starting your baking company?
Why do you only use coconut in your frosting?
How dare you? How dare you, multi? Am I supposed to use something else?
No,
Tell me
no.
the
The
secrets.
answer is that because all the cakes you make call for coconut frosting.
No.
Makes perfect sense.
Wait.
What do you mean? Carrot cake? Yes. German chocolate? Yes. What's the third?
Coconut cake.
Need coconut for that.
Why are you
Anyway.
always right? What was I gonna say? I know Pride Month is over, but I still left because we unfortunately did not give it more mention last week when we had Randolph on the show. Hey, Randolph. That's not in the chat. But
With us in spirit.
yes, thank you. Rollin, you're on it. You're on it.
I guess so.
No, I still wanted to give mention, and I'll probably continue to. Jack, and they still have the online website. So please, by all means, still go ahead and spend your money. I get paid tonight, so I can buy something else. Spend your money. All of it goes 100% to funding and helping sex workers. And as I talk, I know I have a banner for it, so I can just keep talking about it. I don't have the banner anymore, so that's okay. But the link is in the description for the website.
Just pretend there's a banner there.
Pretend there's a banner. The banner is, and you know what? I have a there you go. There's the
Use your
banner.
mind's eye.
In your mind's eye, we're gonna go over to the Discord for a little bit, to chat it up and stuff, or just shoot the shit, whatever you want to do. Doesn't matter. But I appreciate this conversation, folks, and everyone in the chat that had things to say. Thank you, Uncher. I love you. Carrot cake doesn't have coconut in it, Multi.
That's right. It's cream cheese frosting.
Thank you.
I thought about that afterwards.
He knew. He knew. He just didn't say anything.
Yep.
He was like, I'm just gonna let her be wrong because I got one up on her.
I'm just gonna roast Jenna, but based on the wrong premise. That's fine.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty savage, Multi.
See,
I'm watching
all
you.
you got to do is say it with confidence, and people think it's true.
Mm-hmm. And that's been our segment of Malty knows a little bit of everything about everything, except when he does.
Hold on. I got it. There it is.
There you go. Except when he doesn't.
Dang, they're always so quick. I can't get the freaking ticker up. Anyways.
Just give me the power. I got this.
Oh God. Wait,
Give me the
where's your
give me-
soundboard?
You don't want my soundboard to come up. It's gonna break everything.
It probably will. Okay,
It's part
that's
of the
enough.
voice mod thing, and for some reason it takes my camera away as well. So I'm just like, forget it.
Gosh. All right, Justin's giving me the eye. I gotta end this. Justin, final thoughts. Appreciate it. Good. Thank you, chat, for participating. I loved everything everyone was saying in there. Join us in the Discord. We'll see you next week.